So in this video, this is going to be a how-to of doing an ABF loom, which uses so it's CE2 fusebox style plug and play conversion. So basically this is what you need to be left with. I'll also go through what's been removed from the loom, and then you can see, so basically this will fit into a Mark II, a late Mark II, or if you're doing another Mark III, if it needs to be like in this one, what needs to be done. So first we'll cover the immobilizer. So this is the immobilizer box, which is pretty much standalone. So this black wire is a 12 volts. This is pretty self-explanatory. This is an earth, which goes to the box, and also actually ends up feeding the ring as well. Now this, so that's literally the only wire you need to plug in is this one, and this, which is in the fuse box, is plug and play, and this literally will go in there. If you got Mark II, if you got Mark III, you'll just remove this and put this on. So what we've done is just because it goes onto a brake switch, which isn't needed, but it just makes it just easier plug and play. You just literally just remove this from the fuse box, plug it in, and you've got that done. So you've got this black wire, which is 12. This grey wire here, this small little grey wire, goes onto this little connector, which is basically, this is for the OBD2 diagnostic port, goes into like a little separate thing. So that's pretty self-explanatory again. This is the ring, which goes on the a lot of people now stick this underneath, and you can sellotape kind of the chip actually on it itself. A lot of people tend to try and put the key on here, but really for this to work it needs to be clipped in. Even if you got a Mark II, it does actually clip in to the Mark II ignition barrel, and you just put the key into the chip, or you buy a newer key with a chip thing, or you can hide it underneath. A lot of people do. I tend to not to. I just get a key made with a chip. Just take the chip out of the old key, put it into the new key, and plug this in. It just makes life a lot easier. So this really is self-contained. This the immobilizer side. The only connection that this has to the engine side of stuff is this grey and white wire with a brown plug, which, as you see, plugs straight into here, which has to be repaired, but it basically just plugs into that there. So these are the plugs that you want to be left with: blue and white wire, red wire, 12 volts, this white plug with the pin like that. Basically all the three white plugs is what you want to be left with, like so. And then obviously that's these are the battery terminal earths, and this is the battery terminal positive, which both go to the fuse box. So it's basically just plug and play. And then as you can see, this basically, we've covered it up. What we use is this felt, this Tessa felt tape that we like, and then this is actually the depinning tool which we use, which is a laser one, and it's a 3932, which is an amazing tool to depin the plugs and stuff. Does 80% of all the VW plugs pins. So this is what you're left with. So we've basically just kept, so the first thing that comes off here, which is self-explanatory, this is the lambda sensor, and then further down you have the air temp sensor that goes in the airbox, and the solenoid for the charcoal canister, and that is just the air temp sensor for the dash, and that's what this plug is here for. This one, this purple and white one, is the air temp for the dashboard, for the clocks. And then coming over to this side, again, it's pretty. So next one down the line is the coil pack, which is a 3-pin one. and then the ECU plug. Then as we come down the line, we have the earth for the battery terminal, and then we have the 12 here for the battery terminal. And then as we come further down the line, we have the reverse light switch, the alternator, igniter, and then we have here the main plug that goes onto the side of the engine. Then we've got knock sensor, key 12 for the starter motor, and a crank sensor. So those are all there. And then on this side, this is the actual loom that goes on the engine. It looks a bit messy, but it has been all recovered, and once it's on the engine it will actually look good. So again, it's pretty easy. So these are the oil temp, oil pressure high and low that go on the oil filter housing. This is the idle valve, the white plug. This plug with the 5 wires is for the injector rail with a sequential firing. And on this side, the white plug is coolant temp. This odd shaped plug is quite familiar. It's quite unique to the VW. It goes on the distributor. On this engine, it doesn't actually use the Hall sensor in the distributor. It only has one window, so the car will actually run with this disconnected. This is basically just a cam sensor. So for the sequential injecting to fire one at a time, or batch. I think it's batches on this one. I don't think it's individual. I'm not sure. I can't remember. And then we have these are earths for the sensors. And this is another coolant one. I think it's for the clocks. And then yes, this 3-pin one is actually for the speedo. It goes on the speedo drive on the gearbox. Then moving along to the very end, this is the one that goes right round the back and sometimes gets damaged because it sits. People don't clip it back in, and it sits above the exhaust manifold around the back. So basically, the 3-pin is for the TPS on the throttle body. This is the ignition. This is for the throttle body stop to engage the idle valve and let the ECU know when that's done. And this is just an auxiliary 12 which sits there. I think it's for a VW tool, maybe I don't know, to plug something in, but it's just 12. It doesn't actually go anywhere. It just sits on the breather pipe. And doesn't actually do anything. This one, it's like an auxiliary 12. So this is what you should be left with once you've removed this lot. So now, the other loom that you saw, this is all tangled up inside that loom, and without the de-pinning tool, you're gonna have to end up cutting wires and then resoldering them, which I don't like to do because it always leaves some kind of problems, and it makes the loom look messy and stuff. So that's why I de-pin them. It takes a bit of time, but because VW for some reason only on the late Mark III, because in the Mark II the engine loom and the light loom was separate. The early Mark IIs, the light loom and the engine loom is separate, but on the facelift for this late 94, 95 onwards, all Mark IIIs that I'm aware of anyway, 8 valve, 16 valve and VR6s, they integrated the looms. And then funny enough, with the Mark IV they went separate again, so the engine loom, you know, with the ECU is separate to the light installation, which is just easier just to install, just time wise for manufacturing and stuff. So this all gets stuck in that loom. So basically what you have to remove from the engine loom that you don't need if you're doing a plug and play is this white plug, which is for the wipers, as well as the side repeaters that go in there, so that's not needed. And these 3 yellow plugs which are for the lights. So these are for, like, you know, the headlights, fan control, side repeaters, the horn. All this stuff is in these 3 plugs, which we don't need, especially if you are doing a Mark II conversion. And in this 3.5, I'm assuming because it is a later car, it does actually have a Bosch ECU and ME7 ECU on it with a separate loom. So, you know, the loom is separate on that car, even though it is a Mark III basic. It does have a separate loom. It is wired up differently. So the light loom. So this is why I've done it on this car. Potentially, if it was just doing a straight swap from Mark III to Mark III, I would have just left all this in the loom and it would have been plug and play. But potentially, because just for simple removal, maybe I want to remove the engine one day, put it into a Mark II or put it into a Mark I. It just makes life a lot easier. Removing this as well as for what I'm doing, it needed to be done, or it just would have been messy. So yeah, so you remove everything that's associated with these 3 yellow plugs, which is obviously then also goes to, this is what you see on the slam panel, the lights and stuff, and it goes across for the fog lights and all the rest of it. So yeah, so this is basically what I've removed off that loom to shrink it down. It's pretty straightforward. If you do have any questions on colours and stuff, leave that in the comments.